Oh, this is a Talking Business on a Desert Radio. If you are just joining us from anywhere else in the world, it's desertradio.fm. You will be able to follow this all important conversation from there because we do have that global face. If you're in Windhoek, Rehoboth, Dodabis, and the surrounding areas where you find us is 95.3 FM, you surely can just drive around and listen to this all important conversation that we're about to get now on our Talking Business. Like I said earlier, we will be talking about the investment bill. So I am joined here in the studio by Dr. Michael Nokokure Humavindu, who is currently the Deputy Executive Director in the Ministry of Industrialisation and Enterprise Development at the Ministry of Industrialisation, Trade and SME Development. Previously, he served as a Director of Economics and Sector Research at the Namibian Competitions Commission. He also served as a Manager of Research at the Development Bank of Namibia and as an economist in the Ministry of Environment and Tourism. He has also published some of his research as peer-reviewed journal articles. He is currently serving on the Ministry of Environment, Tourism, Sustainable Development Advisory Committee. He has also served on the boards of NAMDEB Holdings, Namibia University of Science and Technology, and at the Agribank. Dr. Humavindu holds a PhD in economics from the University of Umeå in Sweden, and MSc in Finance and Investment from Durham University in the United Kingdom. Very good day to you, Doctor, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you very much, and thanks for inviting us to the ministry.
It's always a pleasure. Well, Doctor, let's get right into it. There is this thing that's being talked about by everybody, the investment bill. Well, critics of the bill believe that it's not exactly the way to go. Government also believes it's going to better opportunities for both local and foreign investors. You are consulting now, or you are about to conclude your consultation. So just briefly, just get straight into it. What is this bill all about, and how helpful is it going to be to Namibians?
Thank you very much. The investment bill is actually an old work that has been developed since the early 2000s. The main idea there is that we need to upgrade our investment law in the country. We have a very old one, the 1990 foreign direct investment, and already the title already tells you it's foreign direct investment, so we were not giving attention to domestic investment, domestic investors, and therefore then there was also a need to ensure that we crowd in new aspects around how do we ensure that we also promote special economic zones, for example. How do we look after the interest of Namibians that are also looking for certain concessions and certain support through our investment laws. So essentially is to revamp the old law to ensure that we have a law that speaks not only to foreign direct investors, but also to both domestic investors. That way, somehow not catered for in the old law.
Oh, if you are just joining us, that's just a briefer from Dr. Michael Humavindu talking to us about the investment bill. If I say it correctly, is the Namibia Investment Promotion and Facilitation Bill, which is being consultative phases now. He mentions the idea that, well, it is also going to protect Namibians. But protectionism, has it ever worked anywhere, Doctor? And do we really have to protect certain sectors for Namibian investors, whatever happens to the ethos of our free market economy where competition thrives?
Yes. Now, there are two things that we need to give particular attention to. The first thing is around the philosophy of foreign direct investment. And there you look at two aspects. There are those ones that promote quantitative FDI. So for them, it's all about let's just bring in as much FDI as we can, 100 millions of Namibian dollars, and that's it. There are those that look at qualitative FDI, the ones that then obviously want to make sure that it supports the environmental sustainability of a country, it supports social integration, it supports business dynamism, it looks after the small business sectors to grow. And therefore, if you look at our own balance sheet as a country, we have a very low entrepreneurship culture and very low entrepreneurship dynamism. So we most likely edge towards the qualitative FDI to ensure that we can also look at how do we ensure that the FDI that we attract, but also the domestic direct investment that we attract supports business dynamism in the country. Now, we know very well that we have been an enclave economy for some time, and we don't have a lot of linkages even between the current existing productive patterns versus our own indigenous businesses. And these are the things that have been coming through in terms of the complaints from the indigenous businesses, that they believe that the current old law does not really cater for that, and therefore the current law basically then looks at what does the rest of the world do. First of all, you have to screen investment so that you can see as to are there those factors that can support qualitative foreign direct investment or domestic direct investment. And secondly, what does the rest of the world do in terms of what you call sector reservations? So that is now coming to protectionism. Now, there are many countries that do have what we call negative list. One list is where they just completely close the whole sector, and some other sectors are open. In terms of our current law, we have had the indigenous business people's cries, but we have also realized that as a country that needs to attract investment, we need to find the middle ground. And therefore, we are not going wholesale in reserving sectors, but we are basically playing with a few parameters, as we have explained in the presentations. We look at, for example, agriculture and say that perhaps agriculture, we are not going to reserve the whole sector for Namibians, but we'll reserve, say, all the projects that are up to 7.5 million will be reserved for Namibia. So your small-scale poultry entities or your small-scale people that are doing mahangu, you don't need to see foreign direct investment in that. Rather, you reserve that for Namibians. But beyond that, you will then allow for anyone else to come into that particular space to play. Same with retail, same with matters such as construction and roads. We know very well that we've seen a lot of indigenous people that are in the construction sector complaining around that they are not getting the tenders. So even that sector is a sector that we have provided parameters. And these parameters will also be released for public consultations so that they can tell us as a government as to perhaps in that sector, rather than reserving 200 million contracts only for Namibians, maybe we want 450 million. But then there should be serious evidence provided, as well as a coherent argument as to why we need to up that parameter. So Namibia went for the middle road rather than obsolete closing of all sectors, in the hope that that will also help to drive our cultural entrepreneurship that is a bit on the low side, but also to allow some business dynamism without losing your FDI.
Well, if you are just joining us, that is the voice of Dr. Michael Humavindu, just explaining to us the need for maybe protecting certain sectors, or at least striking a middle ground where they protect certain sectors for the local. You also have been very vocal, and you also pretty much involved as a ministry in the Grandwa Africa Continental Free Trade Area. How does it work to come up with some sort of a protectionist policy, and at the same time, you are saying, let's open up the borders to Africans to be able to trade? Where do you strike the balance?
Definitely, you must also realize that regionalism itself also pushes for maybe what you call regional economic nationalism. You have nationalism here, economic nationalism here, but then also the fact that we are sitting with natural endowments, us in Africa, whether it is the SADC level or at the continental level. I also think that, for example, why don't we ensure that the e-car, for example, electric batteries sector, is something that we collaborate, because we have the natural resources. We might not have the skills, but then we ensure that all of that work is done here. So the same argument that you have at the national level permeates to regional levels, where even at SADC they look at mineral beneficiation. How do we utilize our rich lithium resources that we have across SADC to ensure that we benefit this time and upgrade ourselves? Because if you look at FDI, over the past 30 years or so, many countries, their literature will show you that as much as they have received FDI, it didn't change much of your productive structure. I mean, we have been shelling out our mineral resources for so many years, but we are just basically exporters of natural resources. Our industrialization component is not well developed. We don't have highly tech manufacturing, for example, or very good manufacturing that can support job creation, or the link to agro-processing, for example, non-existent, despite the FDI that we have received. And that is basically the philosophy that I'm talking about. The new investment law is trying to ensure that we create an FDI, but also a domestic direct investment that support the change of productive structure of economy to become much more competitive, rather than just an enclave economy that just exports minerals and don't do much of in terms of even our own food security, for example. So these are the critical things that we're looking at, not only at the national level, but also at the regional level, but also on the continental level. And within that permeations, that's where you see how, even if we look at the African continent's template that they send in terms of the special economic zones, they try to make sure that we have those policy flexibility or policy space to ensure that we are able to grow, not necessarily very rigid measures that will not make the others grow as you open the borders.
Well, we will be talking more on this topic as you joined us on a 95.3 FM at Desert Radio. The voice behind the mic is, of course, yours truly, Tiri Masawi. Like I said, also, I am joined in the studio by my colleague, that's Shania Lazarus. She does quite a lot of work in terms of research for this program. We are in conversation with Dr. Michael Humavindu. We are talking about the investment bill. For those that are just joining us, it's called the Namibia Investment Promotion and Facilitation Bill. And we are breaking it down a bit by bit here. Well, there was something that one of the economists raised recently on this very same program sometime on Friday. That's Robert McGregor. He says that there seems to be a fear of the obvious from government to say maybe let's protect our economy from maybe these sectors from foreigners. They will come dominate, then locals who will lose. But he was also giving examples to say, well, other economies that have actually prospered, if you look at the United Arab Emirates, for example, in Dubai, it's mostly foreign investment that is working there and it has been opened up. You are talking of protecting maybe agriculture. He was also raising a point that also is pertinent in terms of innovation and technology. If you protect certain sectors and you do not have the adequate technology and innovation to drive these, you can't just do agriculture in modern day without really agro-processing or agriculture mechanization. Are we more walking the right path?
Definitely, because the work that is being done in terms of the new investment laws to ensure that we have a better grasp around how do we support, facilitate, regulate, and develop investment. Now, if, for example, you are highly open-ended and anyone with an investment in agriculture comes through, and you do not look at how to ensure that these linkages of that particular agricultural investment can create and support innovation, can give us drought-resistant seed varieties, for example, how to ensure that we incentivize them to do that for us, how to ensure that they can support our logistics sector in the economy as they take their produce from one point to the next point, and how do they also upgrade our standards in terms of exporting the particular product. If you don't do that, you are basically allowing anything to come in the country. Now, the fears of many similars like the speaker that you mentioned is that I think their bias is based on quantitative FDI. You need to be a country that just scream at, I've got 200 million FDI received this year, so I'm better than Rwanda. That's not how FDI should be regulated, especially for us in the global south. We need to ensure that it supports our productive structure transformation. Other than that, we are basically just going to be receivers without doing anything.
Okay, if you are just joining us, I'm still with Dr. Humavindu. We are going to just quickly pay the bills, and when we come back, we get to dig deeper into the technicalities of this all-important bill that's coming on. Stay tuned on Desert Radio.
Please. Yo, see that guy over there? It's Matthew. He's the gent who gave me my first job. Mentored me, And when it came time for me to try my own thing, he was the first to invest. What a legend.
We all leave a mark on someone. Now's the perfect time to leave yours. Vinduklaga. Perfect time, perfect beer. Not for persons under the age of 18. Enjoy responsibly.
Hi, I'm David Nuyoma. Be sure to tune in on Desert Radio 95.3 FM every Monday and Wednesday between 11 a.m. and 12 for the best of business and financial news, in-depth interviews, and stock market analysis on Talking Business.
Yes, indeed, you are tuned to the correct station, 95.3 FM at desertradio.fm, and we are talking everything business, investment, specifically for locals and international investors here. We are looking at the finalization of the country's investment bill. For those that are just joining us, it's called the Namibia Investment Promotion and Facilitation bill that is currently being in its consultative phase. I think, Doctor, let's just also get right into it. When we say consultations, how wide are these consultations? I think we always have a problem when we say we have consulted, and the stakeholders, if we do go to the actual business stakeholders that represent SMEs, that represent different categories of business, how widespread have you gone with these consultations to make sure that every other view that is needed to make sure this bill captures the essence of what needs to be achieved are done?
Okay, we are looking at more than 15 years of consultations on this bill. I mentioned that work on this bill started in 2006 or so. The bill was actually ascended into as a law in 2016 after wide consultations. But then the private sector then requested that it should not be implemented because they want further consultations. Between 2016 and 2020, there were additional consultations. Then in November 2021, the minister tabled it in Parliament. It had to be withdrawn again for the fact that additional consultations were needed. The past 8 months, the minister has been crisscrossing the country. We've gone to all the 14 regions, have sent requests for inputs, and then the final one was last week. So within this period of the past 8 months where the minister was crisscrossing the country, there were various opportunities for people also to make consultations. There is also a technical committee that was established to look at the concerns that were raised during the time of the November 2021. We have held 12 sessions around it with the lawyers to make sure that we work through it. But the one thing that we want to highlight as a ministry, just in short, is that we also took into consideration the business fragmentation in this country. So we sent specific requests to all of the business organizations to make their input, and they did. Your NALOBAS, your NCCI, your Black Business Leadership Network, and then your United Entrepreneurship Association Network of Namibia, the Mining Prosperity Network of Namibia, and then obviously the informal sector economy people, NISO. They all made their formal submission as well, which we are grateful for, because at least now the business voices are also balanced.
Well, Doctor, maybe this pretty much would be a difficult one, but I would have to ask you, if we are really going through with this bill after this back and forth, there seems to be a hide and seek between government, or there are bonds of contention that are there between what government wants and what private sector is. What private sector is simply asking for, if I've been following this for quite some time, they are not very, very pro-protectionism. They say maybe it's restrictive in terms of lowering the much-needed capital. That's what they're arguing. Government on the other side is saying, oh, it will create opportunities for businesses. So, like, is there a time that maybe the two are going to meet each other halfway and be able to, remedy all these other things?
I have to correct you there. The cries for protectionism is not endogenously made by government. It comes from especially the indigenous business associations. Remember, these things, they all emanated also from the cries that we used to hear from the public. Apologies to use the word, the Asians are taking over businesses, the Asians are not doing things the right way, or that particular foreign entities are not doing things the right way. We can't find how do they get into the country. They are now busy selling cigarettes on the street. It went to that level, you understand, to that micro behavioral level. And it started evolving into what we now see as business fragmentations. And these business fragmentations are the ones that are then carrying the various interest sections in terms of what they want. So as a government, you try to find the middle way, and you also go around and see what is the rest of the world doing. And it's pervasive. Whether you go to the global north, you find countries like Australia, you don't come and invest in the agricultural sector just like that, or their rental property and housing market just like that. They do screening, and they want to ensure that you are the right type of investor. China has recently also introduced its international investment law, I think in 2020, 2021. Also with sector reservations, you find across the world that these things are happening. All what we did as a government was to say, we hear the various interest groups, but then what we need to do is to make sure that we find a middle way so that we balance. Because initially already, domestic investment was not even catered for in the 1991 old law. We must not forget that fact. So now it's a matter of trying to make sure that we mainstream them as well, but not at the cost of overall FDI, but to make sure that there's a balance. So it's a difficult balancing act.
Difficult balancing act indeed. If you are just joining us, my name is yours truly, Tiri Masawi. The program is Talking Business, and we are definitely talking business with Dr. Michael Humavindu. We are talking about the investment bill that is in its umpteenth consultative time, and they still continue to consult. Obviously, when new laws are made or laws are amended, Doctor, they are obviously the fear that comes. Okay, how is this law going to work? Is it going to bite retrospectively for those, maybe let's say those few foreigners that are in these sectors that we're trying to protect, or does it bite going forward? What mechanism is also being put that if it's going to bite going forward, it doesn't also close the gap to say maybe those ones that we had entered these sectors that are now protected can also look at joint ventures? How are you dealing with that whole matrix?
Yes, definitely. You would never want to lose the sunk investment of a person. So that is not something that, and it's very explicit in the law that, and there are also various ways of how do you handle even the successions. If maybe the parent investor passed on, and so those are provided for. What really matters is, and then joint ventures are also provided for. We suggest 33%, but the consultations will teach us as to whether Namibians want it higher, or they don't feel like it's a mere moot point. But it's important that you do not lose sunk investment. It's also important to realize that the reserve sectors are really those what you find a lot of indigenous business people into: your corner shops, your taxis, your hair salons, your basic agriculture. So we don't really expect to see a lot of dynamism in terms of competition in there, but we will also not rest on our laurels. We'll continue to appropriate evidence-based policy making around these things, because, as I said, for us, once everything is done, it's all about evidence, and also it's also about learning as a country that perhaps the capabilities that we are learning through these sector reservations might not be what we need for becoming international competitive.
Well, that's the voice of Dr. Michael Humavindu. If you are just still with us, we are on 95.3 FM on Talking Business with Tiri Masawi. Today we are talking about the investment bill. As we would start winding off, Doctor, obviously this year's take, you said 15 years. That's quite a long time to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. Are you satisfied where you are now that eventually maybe this law is going to shape up?
Yes, I think we have a much more clarified positions in terms of the various business associations. We have a much more clarified legal perspective around key clauses that might have seemed problematic. But I think also what also helped here is that in the same time we also work with the SADC desk to look at whether our current and our proposed investment laws are integrated within the SADC investment framework. We also did a survey around that with 30 stakeholders or so, for which most of the outcomes are positive. So I think that builds a lot in terms of where we are. And I think we have clarified a lot. The minister crisscrossing the country, all 14 regions, also brought a lot of things. Some extreme views were also saying that the law is too soft. Some other views were saying that the law is too neoliberal. Some other extreme laws are saying the law is too punitive. But I think at the end of the day, we have actually now started allowing more voices to be amplified, as opposed to only some certain voices that were able maybe to have access to capital and media and the likes.
Or the minister, I'm just going to quote a verbatim when she was speaking of the current Foreign Investment Act. She highlighted the fact that fear fails to accommodate newer investment dynamics, such as innovation and sustainability. She also said the old legislation, which is fear, does not back feasible initiatives that promote investment driven by the fourth industrial revolution, nor does it adequately enhance new policy developments regarding special economic zones, which aim to attract investments. How best have you now, maybe in this current conversation that you have, how best have you made sure that all these problems that she was raising have been flushed out?
Yeah, remember the investment law, or the draft investment law, is just part of the arsenal of what government is trying to ensure that to promote business dynamism. And even if you may call it supporting more local business. Early this year, our ministry also worked with the Ministry of Finance in terms of public procurement notice that also reserves certain sectors in terms of support for public procurement. We have worked on the special economic zone law, and we are finalizing the law now, because that will also fit into ensuring that we are competitive also on the continent. We have also worked around, we have initiated work around a national investment policy itself, because that will now speak to the incentives. How do you incentivize the investors? How do you make sure that you attract those investments that support sustainability, social integration, and business dynamism in the country, and ultimately then support how you start going the ladder of becoming a much more productive structural economy than what we've been all these years. Whether you go to 1904, whether you go to 1990, we basically were just an export driven economy, but we want to balance the economy, and the investment law is one of those key tools that does that.
Dr. Humavindu, it's been an absolute pleasure to host you here on Talking Business. We hope we will continuously engage on this all important topic in this program, and also many other programs that would need such an insight. But for today, I would have to say you have yourself a splendid day, and you must keep tuned to 95.3 FM.
Thank you very much.
Then that was the voice of Dr. Michael Humavindu, just giving us more into the consultations of the investment bill. And he says just a quick takeaways. It will eventually, he does believe that they have sailed through to where they want to be. So definitely they feel the bill will actually be passed. He also says, government isn't really the one that's pushing for protectionism. It's actually coming from the indigenous businesses themselves. So they are also just making sure that they strike a balance. He also agrees it's a very difficult balancing act to balance what they want to achieve on a regional and a continental scale, and what they also want to achieve on a local scale. But of course, consultations do continue. We will keep our eyes and ears on these all important issues. My name is Tirimasa. We do stay tuned. When we come back, I will be talking to you about, our lesson of the day. Do stay tuned for that one. We'll talk in the next few minutes.
This is Talking Business on Desert Radio.
Hi, I'm David Nuyoma. Be sure to tune in on Desert Radio 95.3 FM every Monday and Wednesday between 11 a.m. and 12 for the best of business and financial news, in-depth interviews, and stock market analysis on Talking Business.